For decades, the right wing, led and financed by billionaires such as the Koch brothers, has been plotting the overthrow of democratic government and replacing it with a corporate plutocracy. Most Americans have been blissfully unaware of this. Many others felt that democracy in force for over 2 centuries had so entrenched itself as to be invulnerable. And a few, less sanguine, thought that under certain conditions, the revered democratic tradition could indeed be jeopardized. This latter position was rooted in historical fact. Under conditions of economic distress, extreme and oppositional political forces come to the fore. At one end is a virulent right made up of the moneyed class intent on preserving the system that has enriched it. However, that system may be failing the majority. At the other end is a progressive left wing that opts for the people, sees no solution for them within the failing system, and is intent upon changing it. Although most everyone, including the media, avoids the actual terminology of the struggle, perhaps thinking it too explosive, it is very simply a battle to the death between capitalism and socialism. Capitalism being the faltering system, and socialism being capitalism's replacement that promises relief through greater economic equality. It is class struggle at its height. The historical precedent for our current situation is Germany in 1932. Battered by economic depression, the threatened capitalist elite rallied behind the Nazi Party with the conviction that Adolf Hitler would put at bay the socialist communist forces that threatened it. And he did, with millions of left-wingers sharing the fate of the Jews in genocidal ovens, an atrocity hardly, if ever, acknowledged in the U.S. We will probably never witness that extreme in America, but the rest of the political picture is unfolding in much the same way. Donald Trump, the racist and virulent anti-socialist champion of a failing system, is our nation's leader. And while Hitler was never subject to democratic will, Trump came to power by wooing the victims of that system, only to further imprison them in it, just as Hitler did. And like Hitler, he overcame a strong left that in the U.S. was represented by Bernie Sanders, the socialist discarded by the Democratic Party. Trump blithely skipped down the path to power, which was conveniently and mindlessly cleared for him. The coup has been accomplished, with Trump not even winning the popular vote. The American elite that Bernie had consistently targeted has at last asserted the total control it has long been striving for. What now for the people? First of all, Trump has not put forward a viable plan to relieve economic hardship, as Hitler did. Hitler built the Autobahns, financed a people's car, the Volkswagen, poured money into a defunct arms industry, and created social welfare programs. Trump promises to beef up an already over-bloated defense industry, and there are no other industries he can create, resurrect, or repatriate. He hints vaguely at infrastructure renewal, but to come up with the needed money, he would have to increase taxes on his own wealthy class, and he promises to do just the opposite. So what will American fascism actually look like? In 20th century Europe, fascism had some temporary economic benefits, both in Italy and Germany. In our 21st century of global capitalism, ruled by multinational corporations, those options don't exist. So all we can look forward to is repression without economic improvements to offset it, which means that the very economic conditions that put Trump in power will persist and ultimately destroy him, because he can supply no relief for them, as could the European fascists. When Hitler's program, based on slave labor and the expropriation of people's wealth and property, hit the inevitable wall, he kept his power and the people united by starting a world war. For many reasons, Trump doesn't even have that option. As with everything else with Trump, he has the form, but not the substance. Nonetheless, he will certainly plague our lives by attempting, and perhaps succeeding, to pass restrictive legislation directed at the population in general and immigrants in particular. By further fanning racial violence through oppressive law enforcement and curtailing or reducing needed social benefits. by depleting or outright destroying vital protective agencies such as the Environmental Protection Agency and the Consumer Protection Bureau, by privatizing essential and long-standing public institutions such as our public school system, by continuing to devastate the environment by promoting for-profit carbon-emitting fuel industry instead of renewable resources, by withdrawing U.S. support of global agreements to reverse global warming, by removing any regulations that, in protection of the people, prevent maximization of profit, such as those garnered in the payday loan racket, by appointing ultra-conservative Supreme Court judges who will jeopardize women's and others' rights, and by further undermining democracy by supporting those states that would repress voters' rights, particularly those of minorities. These abominations can possibly be thwarted by massive public resistance and by those legislators who still see it as their duty to serve the people rather than the oppressive minority. But given the GOP majorities in both houses, this latter scenario is unlikely, leaving the people to slash their own way out of the fascist jungle. And they will, because there will be no improvement in their lives. When Trump's promises prove hollow, his mask will be removed. And even to those who supported him, he will be revealed for what he is, the opportunistic figurehead for a fascist ruling class, and not even a good Hitler. At that point, the ruling class noose will tighten even more. We must be prepared to cut it, not with knives, but with an irrepressible anti-fascist outpouring at the polls, which we actually had in the past election, given the popular will that was subverted by the antiquated Electoral College. Despite the ill-advised votes for Trump, Americans are not fascists at heart. Only their capitalist rulers, who now hold sway power.